We were just here. Actually, we were because we did our usual Sunday on Monday, and now it's Wednesday, and it feels like we were just sitting here. But it's good to be here again. Hope you guys are doing well. While we wait for more people to show up here in the chat, I will start off first by saying that I appreciate very much everybody taking the time to watch this live or in the rerun. It's a very special thing also to hear from you down in the chat. If it takes a little bit of time to write something, that's time that I appreciate you spending. So, also in the comment section as well, I'd like to hear from you. Yeah, good to be here, guys. Um, let's see where we are at. So, let me do a refresh here because I can't see the chat. That's not a good thing. And yeah, there we go. I think we got ourselves set up here. Yeah, there we go. I can put something in and see it. Good. I hope everybody's doing fine out there. You know, it's funny to me that as a musician, you kind of go full circle if you get old enough, if you're lucky enough to get old enough. Um, and one of the things that comes full circle, I think, is your gear. Um, I think that we have stages as musicians when it comes to gear. Let me adjust my light here a little bit. Yeah, it's a little better. I think we have stages as musicians when it comes to gear. When we first get started, it's usually pretty rudimentary, unless you're my friend Steve DeMont, who had a 60s Black Beauty Les Paul Custom when he was like 13 as a bar mitzvah present. And but generally most of us were playing pretty I would say not the most expensive gear. And also another thing is I try to climb back through time and think back in my youth and playing in garage bands in my neighborhood. um, we didn't really care. I think one of the most important things when I was starting out as a musician, as a kid, was functionality. If it worked, then that was, good enough. Didn't particularly care about who made it. We didn't particularly care about what was inside of it, or what kind of pickups it had. Matter of fact, if you would ask anybody in John McKnight's garage, because he had the most instruments, what kind of pickups were in those guitars that we were playing at that time, the answer would have been like, I have no idea. We wouldn't have known the difference between an Alnico pickup and a ceramic pickup. We wouldn't have. It's just a fact. And I think as you progress as a musician, as you go on, and if you become a professional, you start to get around other guys, and gear kind of becomes water cooler talk. It just is. It's one of those things, especially if you work in a studio. Oh, I heard that such and such is coming out with this next week or the next month, or this is going to be the next hot thing, or he was using this, that, and the other, and those kind of discussions uh, affect you. Also, if you're not in that kind of environment where you're in a studio environment like I was when that was water cooler talk, the other thing would be the forums or magazines like Guitar World, things like that during that time that sort of really got into the nitty gritty of things that generally when you were younger, you didn't really care about. It wasn't a big issue. And so, of course, as a result of that kind of water cooler talk or reading, studying, getting into it, you start to get to the point where you start carrying this brand or that brand. Oh, that's not a this, that it should, that's not good enough. Those kind of discussions. We've talked about them before. And then you acquire these things and you realize that the talk sometimes is bigger than the actual kind of result that you get out of these things. Um, the mojo is really not really particularly there any more so than any other guitar or bass or drum or saxophone or flute or whatever keyboard. And then you regress back in that cycle and you start to see the value in not what's on the headstock or the maker, any of those things, but really, again, getting back the functionality of it. It be back to basics. Does it work? Does it function? And that level of functionality, of course, can be a little bit higher than it was when you're first starting out, but it's still basically there. And what it says on the headstock, it doesn't really particularly matter anymore. 7189, Miss White, is Tayon White. Tayona White, welcome. How you doing? Welcome to the chat. Um, so honestly speaking, um, I look at I was okay. So I say all that as a prelude to tonight's discussion. Tonight's main discussion is when guitar gear stops being fun. Scott, hey, how you doing, Scott? Welcome. Um, because you get to another part, a point in your, part of that cycle, point in your life as a musician, where you kind of get sick of all of it. it, I was two things inspired tonight's discussion. First thing was a YouTuber who went to NAM and he was all stoked and he thought, oh, I'm going to get all this great content and, all these exciting things are going to be, there for me to film. And he came back home and he said there was nothing. He says, I've got nothing. Nothing excited me. Nothing was fantastic. Nothing stood out. And I thought that was hilarious. The second thing that inspired tonight's thought was I was watching an old episode of that '70s show called Punk Chick, season one, episode 22. And in that episode, Hyde, one of the character males, uh, gets picked up on by a punk chick that blows through town on a motorcycle, moped. And they have this scene where they're going through the town, and it's almost like on their own loop. They see Woolworths, they see the Piggly Wiggly, they see the Price Mart, they see the wars, the Piggly Wiggly, and it's this loop that they're on. And I thought that was kind of appropriate. Mr. Watson, hey, how you doing? All right. Let me see. Why am I not getting any picture? This is so weird. Let me refresh here, guys. Technical difficulties. Forgive me, guys. Hey, Michael, by the way, while I'm waiting for this, there we go. While I'm waiting for this, I sent you an email regarding the CD. I think that it's been exactly a month now, and I'm of the opinion that that's far too long. So what I did is I made you another one. So this is the replacement. It's actually cool because I actually have the hologram seal that came in. So I'm gonna and I'll sign the back on this one as well. But I will be sending this one off to you. I found a way of doing it online here. They wouldn't let me do it at the post office when I would send it directly, but with this one, I can do it online. I can send it with tracking, and so I will be signing the back and sending a replacement for that one because I think that that's ridiculous how long it's taking to get there. And I can't seem to get any tracking other than just telling me that it made it to the States. So let me do that. That's going to be my solution for that. But I did send you an email on that. Um, Red, hey, how you doing? Welcome, sir. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All you guys are here. Great to have you here. Yeah, so it was those two thoughts that really got me thinking about tonight's subject. Because when you're scrolling guitar content on YouTube, it feels just like that scene from that '70s show. You're rolling through the same small town strip over and over again. It's the same stories, it's the same arguments, same Piggly Wiggly that you're passing by. And although they have different thumbnails to them sometimes, they all have identical energy. Um, I wrote down some of these are actual titles to YouTube videos. Nobody wants to buy these guitars. I spent 40,000 on gear and learned this. Your dream pedal board will fail you. 10 guitar money traps no one talks about. Those are actual titles to guitar YouTubers' videos. And, you know, it came to me, when I was watching that '70s show clip, that I realized something really uncomfortable that, I don't think gear really is the problem on YouTube anymore. I really think the conversation is. I think the conversation is. And because at some point, guitar culture that we've been talking about, the guitar culture, another aspect of things that have changed is it stops sounding curious and actually now starts to sound exhausted. It again, uh, and a little paranoid too. And that's a weird thing. So tonight, I want to talk about that. I want to get into that thought because in this series of discussions around guitar culture that I've been doing, one of the things that we can't put the genie back in the bottle in is YouTube guitar culture. And for its pluses and its minuses, its high points and its low points. Um, High points would actually be actually interesting. Some of the expose work that was done on Fender, for example, destroying those 335s um, unnecessarily when they could have made a deal with a company like what is that Stratosphere and bought those bodies or a company similar to that. And that's a high point because it exposes the waste that occurs. Uh, in my opinion, when they can destroy guitars like that, you really got to worry about the value of the one that didn't get destroyed because I guess maybe that's cutting down on supply. So I guess that dries up the demand, but still, it's waste. Gear used to be about possibility. You bought something because you thought it might open a door for you, a creative door for you, a sound that you heard in your head but hadn't found yet, and maybe a sonic direction that you hadn't tried. You know, I've been a Marshall guy, but you know what? I'm gonna check out the Sedano head, something like that. And somewhere along the way, it seems that gear talk shifted from this kind of curiosity to judgment. And every purchase now is framed like a mistake. I spent $40,000 on gear and this is what I found out. That has kind of a negative implication that, although not revealed uh, per se in the title, it implies it. And every desire is framed as naivete, just being naive. And and if you do dare to get excited about something, it's always followed by a warning. And again, this kind of, let's shall we say, less than positive vibe that dominates the YouTube space that we call the guitar space, um, has driven us to a point where I think that we need to again take over this aspect of the culture. Um, Let me catch up here in the chat because I see things popping up at the corner of my eye. I said hello to Red there. Yeah, Scott, how you doing? I'm not quite too sure what that is, but interesting icon. I hope you're well, man. I hope you guys are all well. It's awfully quiet in the chat tonight. It's okay because you know me, I'll lecture on. I, you know, woe be it to anybody if they ever had to take a class with me. um, you know, this kind of sentiment doesn't come from nowhere. It came from an ecosystem that rewards certain. What's the best way? It's an ecosystem that rewards certainty over curiosity or exploration. What do I mean by that? Um, Platforms like YouTube don't do nuance well, especially when it comes to titles. Clickbait being a good example of that because there's no nuance in a clickbait title. Thumbnails can also, pretty much also lack nuance. But what they have found is that fear does, and regret does. That my biggest top 10 mistakes as a musician. That'll get a lot of clicks. Um, or again, like I said, the real example, I spent 40,000 on gear, and this is what I learned. And it comes across like, don't be stupid like I was. And instead of asking, what does this piece of gear inspire? Is what I'm saying. Instead of asking that question, what does this inspire? We ask, would I regret getting this? And that's a complete different kind of thinking. You've actually, there's a negative spin on it before, you've even asked that real question of, does this inspire something? See, that's why I say, if you want to have one guitar, have one guitar. If you want to have 25 or 30 or 40, have 25, 30 or 40. If one gives you inspiration, and that's the one that you draw inspiration from, fantastic. If it takes 25 and you get a little bit of inspiration from each one, fantastic. But again, inspiration being the main driver behind obtaining that instrument. And it's not a creative mindset at all when you start thinking, well, I regret this. That's really a defensive mindset. And And we joke and talk about gear acquisition syndrome, gas, and regret being a big part of gas. But it really shouldn't be that way at all. I would respect it more if you said, "Let me get this piece of gear because it's going to inspire me to do something," and you worked it into your regular rig, and you found out, well, maybe it didn't do quite what I thought it was. Okay, fair enough. But to even doubt, or to have any, and then not to regret that, that would be even better. Well, I didn't regret that. I tried it and it didn't work. No regrets. That's a good album, by the way. No regrets. Oh, who does that one? I forget her name. It used to be one of my favorite CDs, but of course, alas, my CDs were stolen over many a move. Um, and it looks like another one that I sent to you, Mike. Sorry. I- it's all right. It's okay. There's a remedy for that, and it's not a good look for it not to get there. So it's all right. But um, a lot of these videos aren't wrong per se, but they're incomplete. Um, I spent 40,000 and learned this isn't wisdom. It's actually hindsight. Hindsight is not wisdom. you know, they're putting you up against the wall, and you're like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. That's not wisdom. That's merely hindsight. It's not the same thing. And most of these lessons only exist after the spending, of course. The experimenting, the mistakes, all that kind of stuff. And now they're presented like rules. Whereas again, it's just hindsight. And also presented in hindsight as if like the explores the doing that kind of exploration, that kind of curiosity, um, was the era, was the bad thing to do. When, as I said, the best, even in the worst situation, the best kind of thinking is, well, that didn't work. Let me try something else and move on. Yeah, I tried it. It's better to have tried it than not to have tried it at all, as opposed to I tried it and I'm boy do I regret doing that. But inevitably, that kind of thinking really drains the joy out of things. And that gets back to the start of this conversation where I was saying you get sick of things eventually because, you know, um, those kind of videos, if you watch enough of them, they'll affect your psyche as well. They'll get you into that kind of thinking, which is I consider to be um, a negative kind of spin in your mind, not really, again, providing joy, but draining it. And music, again, once it got tied into finance, it it really has been eating itself in this downward spiral because music doesn't work like finance, and gear doesn't work like a spreadsheet. You know, again, I told you the story in the last live stream about Quincy Jones telling the musicians when they come, bring all your shit, bring all your gear. And that kind of thinking is born out of let's try everything. Let's give it a shot. Let's have a lot of options. And they were in the cost of it, really wasn't a concern. It was boy with that I'm glad I brought that because that really worked out on that record. And you don't find your sound by avoiding making mistakes and wrong turns. Trust me, you know, you your wallet is going to suffer as a result. But again, like I said, that's just par for the course. You accept that, or plan accordingly. That shouldn't be your focus. Now, of course, it's going to suffer, but you still have to make that journey. Gas isn't a syndrome; it's a journey. It's a journey, and is famous for saying, "I got to the top. I've been to the top. There's nothing there." And I think at the end of any musician's journey, I guess maybe some, most, uh, you get to the end of that gear acquisition syndrome journey, and you realize that there's nothing there really, because where you first started from, when you were playing in John McKnight's garage as a kid, was really where the main focus was. There was joy there. There was joy there because the joy was in the creation of the music, or learning a song, learning how to play, or things like that. And you don't really find your sound by avoiding wrong turns. You find them by taking them, and that's just going to be part of the journey. And every wrong turn, when it's framed as a moral kind of a moral failure, um, that's going to keep you from moving forward. And so, a lot of these YouTube videos, when they frame things as a moral failure in a lot of ways, that negativeness, um, it just really makes things feel stuck. Check on the live stream here. Uh, S- Scott, oh, I see, Scott. You're texting these emojis, mailing no mo, ha 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 ha. Yeah, YouTube, mail, no ha. Yeah, yeah. Well, in any case, interesting. It's an interesting live stream here tonight. But I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going. Um, so, this is one of the reasons, of course, why guitar culture feels kind of frozen, because nothing new exists, like that guy was saying when he got back from NAMM. Um, but I think what he was really trying to say is that nothing feels really safe to enjoy. Every amp's got a butt to it. um, every pedal has a don't to it, and every guitar has a you shouldn't to it. you know, I sold all my Fenders. Here's why: for this guitar. That comes up a lot. Right? This is my testimony, and that testimony is just presented to you as some kind of wisdom. But again, it's just hindsight and another musician's journey through that cycle that I've been talking about tonight. And it's just a constant same debate, this loop, this constant loop, same brand, same arguments. regarding those brands. And I'm not saying that the industry has stopped innovation. It's just, it seems like excitement about products don't exist without any kind of skepticism being attached to them. Is that new fender made in Indonesia really that great? Yeah, I'm guilty of it too. I've done that. That's why I said again tonight, is a thought that I had that I can apply to myself as well. Not allowing that kind of negative uh, looping with my YouTube content to exist. You know, and skepticism like this, ironically, has become the safest content in this genre. And I'm sure it exists at the golf club channel as well, but here it really seems pronounced. Everything has to have a skepticism again, like a skepticism attached to it. Again, as I was saying, that fender that's made in Indonesia, is it really any good? Is it worth it? Is it worth buying? Not, I bought it and it helped me write this. And then they play you that and you say, oh, actually, that sounds pretty good. And then you can make a decision from that whether or not it's for you. Maybe it's a sound that you were looking for, or maybe some other piece of equipment that person has. So, again, but unfortunately, you have to have a bit of skepticism attached in your narrative these days in order to be successful on YouTube. Okay, I'm starting to think that Scott's this is that Scott's is writing very cryptically tonight. If that's really you, Scott, I hope it is. I hope nobody's jacked your account. Um, the ants is interesting. I love guitars, and I love the sound of guitars, and I love making music, as you guys know. But I felt myself pulling away from the noise around it more and more as I've gotten to this part of my journey. Not necessarily because I'm done with with you know this subject. It's because I don't want to feel creativity to be tainted with that kind of negative vibe, energy, if you will. I don't want every piece of gear to feel like a confession. Well, I know that you guys think that this is a super cheap pedal, but let me explain to you why. Or I know this is a super expensive pedal, but let me tell you why. Either end of that spectrum with that kind of going into it, apologizing, like you're confessing, is not something that I think is great. At some point, you know, you got to start asking yourself, let me talk about what inspires me about this. In the last video I did regarding the Pocket Master by Sonicate, I talked about there was no excuses for it. As a matter of fact, I was gushing, and honestly so. I was talking about how it affected my sound. And down in the comment section, somebody wrote in and said, hey, I'm going to try this. And what do you, I have one, and what do you use it? And that is the kind of discussion that I want to have that I'd like to see more. It inspired me. And let me tell you how it inspired me, and maybe somebody else will say, hey, that'll inspire me as well. I'll get inspiration from that as well. Um, Now Music Companion is showing it. This is so weird. I'm actually starting to like what is going on because everybody's discussion here in the chat is symbols. It's not words, with the exception of earlier Mr. Watson and Will. Now every Scott and Musical Companion, I'm just getting icons. I'm not getting any kind of lettering. So that's weird. Maybe something going on with YouTube right now. And plus, and also my feed is spinning as well. All right, it's just going to be one of those nights. I'm just going to accept it like that, and hope that at least, at the very least, you guys are digging my point here. You know, will somebody online tell me I'm wrong for liking this? And therefore let me say, oh, I know some of you guys are going to say, it's crappy. No, no, don't even entertain that. I like this because it does this and inspired me to do this. And with this, I'm able to make these kind of solutions. Again, the culture is about solutions, and those solutions come about not from the manufacturers, but through us, musicians, through the solutions that we come up with and we share with each other. Later on, of course, like I said, if it's shared enough, then it becomes a big thing. It becomes a thing that the corporations feel they can profit off of. You can bet you by golly wow that they will come out with their version of that solution that originated with musicians. Again, like I said in the last live stream, we don't want to be in a position where we're asking for the solutions from the corporations. No, we should be doing the solutions ourselves. And we were using the MPC 60, like I said, in a way that Akai, the Japanese engineer, I sat down one time in Japan with one of the engineers who worked on the MPC 60. He had been fired, and it was a pretty sad story that he was telling me at this restaurant. But uh, they noticed that we were using it in ways that they hadn't imagined. And by we, I mean the musicians at that time who were using the MPC 60 in ways that they hadn't imagined it to be used. And again, and they adapted to that solution. The next MPC 62 and all subsequent ones always comes about from the solutions and the ways that musicians use that instrument. And again, these solutions that come out of our culture are really what we want to focus on, not the solutions that are presented to us by the corporations. If not, then gear stops being fun and the joy goes out of it. I had to ask myself, why am I so sick of gear? And I'm just tired of it. It's because there's no joy in it, I realized from that 70 show episode, because you're in this negative spin, this negative contextual, zation of gear. I love the videos that talk about the recording process for the Beatles, for example. Somebody will say, well, they use this instrument and they introduce, uh, what is that? The Melodyne, the Mellotron, things like that, which inspired me to want to try that instrument. I used it on several records that I've done. Again, the joy of it, the joy of it. And as a result of this, we're entering into an interesting phase. Remember, we went through that phase where rigs started to look like the Death Star. So much so that pedal stand producers started producing these three-tiered stands, these things folded out. you know, I look at that. This one guy said, I was like, oh my God, that pedal board looks heavier than carrying, a set of Marshall heads and two 4x12s. you know, People are now starting to look into smaller rigs and fewer options and more intentional choices, scaling down. Not necessarily because people know more, but because they're tired of defending their joy. They're like, I'm gonna just get this. This is the stuff that I use, and this is stuff that I like, and everything else. I don't want to hear about it because, again, like I said, it's nothing but negative connotation. I'm sorry to you guys, by the way. I apologize. I have no idea why YouTube is putting everything up with emojis on my end. I really have no idea. I want to apologize that I cannot respond to the chat today because, quite frankly, I can't read it. Weird. It's got to be a glitch or something. Either that or you guys are pranking me. I'm not sure. Um, anyway, yeah, this is weird. Very strange. Scott is just like, I'm getting ha 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 ha. Anyway, um, that's all right. Um, that's a healthy thing. The gear that survives is the stuff that wasn't overhyped. It actually worked for you. And the stuff that disappears is the stuff that didn't work. And that's healthy. That's getting back to the basic policy of I'm good. Um, the goal really was just to play. Again, I think back to my days back in John McKnight's garage up in the Windsor Hills where I lived. I grew up, California, and it was just a play, you know. Solid state amps through Cort guitars and basses, Sears drums, Casio keyboards. That was our gear. But if you can make that work when you move up, then it's not a big deal to you. You know, Tools are meant to serve music. They're not supposed to be these content cycles. It's unnatural. It's unnatural. And as a result of it, like I said, it's affected this community. I appreciate you putting up my link there, Scott. I appreciate that. I could see that I got. Again, guys, like I said, on my end, I wish you could see this. I don't know how it is on your end, but it is all emojis and it is the weirdest thing. This has never happened before. All of your responses are emojis. And got no idea why. And also, on top of that, my feed keeps freezing up. So there's something going on here tonight, guys. I do appreciate you sticking in there and hanging in there, even though I can't respond back to you guys. Um, really want to let you know I appreciate that. Yeah. I'm stepping off the punk girl's bike. I don't want to see Piggly Wiggly anymore. I don't care. I don't care. Um, I don't think that YouTuber that I mentioned who went to NAMM and said there was really nothing there in terms of really talking about content wise. I just think that there was nothing controversial there, is another thing I think he was kind of saying. Because controversy, gets eyes on your channel. And again, I don't know if that's true. I'm projecting that, but it comes across like that. And I don't care anymore. I'm like, there is something new there, maybe there's nothing new. Maybe he was right. Doesn't matter. I'm getting off the punk chick's bike. I'm not doing that circuit again. I'm off of it. I realized that when I just saw boom, 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 boom. A lot of the companies that I was using to do my work with were doing shady things back to back to back to back to back. And it just made me say, whoa, there's no more joy in this. Now there's only fear. And if I were to, and when I discuss it, I'm only discussing it in the negative, not in the positive. And that's not good. So back away from it. I'm done with it. I'm not using it. I don't want to talk about it because there's no joy in it anymore. Even if I were to sit down and use it, particularly Studio One, changing over to Fender Studio, even if I were to sit down now and use the Studio One program, um, there's no joy in it because I know there's no future in it. And also, there's some shady things that occurred with it, and I'm again forced and being channeled into that box of, well, if you want to get the latest upgrade of this kind of used to be the software that you use, then pay up. Takes the joy out of it. Takes the joy out of it. And so just a reminder that tools were meant to create music. And if they're not joyful or helping that process, then they need to be discarded. If the amp that we were playing through wasn't working, then I ran home and grabbed my solid state amp, which was a PV amp, and took it to John's and we carried on. And the joy carried on. And the joy carried on. So there's that, guys. Since I cannot respond at all to the chat here, I'm going to call it early. I'm going to say goodnight. I have no idea. This is the weirdest thing. I don't know what it looks like on your guys' end, but on this end, it's nothing but emojis. It is the weirdest thing. But anyway, if you're watching again out there, Michael, this is your replacement CD. I'm going to be putting this with the correct track and tracing on it, um, so that we make sure we know where it's at exactly step by step. Although if somebody did take the first one, I hope they play it and enjoy it. At least somebody's enjoying it. But I'm going to get this one out to you. And I want to thank you guys for coming to the Wednesday Night Hump here on the Upstairs to the Right Music channel. Again, my apologies uh, for the weirdness over here with the emojis in the chat. I cannot read one of these. Odd, odd, odd. And a couple of other things that I'm noticing here as well. Thank you, Scott, for hanging in there, man. Thank you always for being there, Scott. I do appreciate it a lot, man. You are just the tops, man. And thank you so much. And to all the rest of you guys, please take care. I will be back this Sunday for Sunday at Mike's. Uh, you guys be good. See you later. Bye bye.